Everyone, welcome to this latest webinar from Conservation Careers. My name's Nick from Conservation Careers, and this webinar is all about switching careers into conservation. Okay, so if you're here because you might be searching for more meaning in your career, perhaps you want a job that matches more closely to your values. You might be working in a totally unrelated field right now and need some clarity on what's needed to switch your careers into conservation. Well, if that describes you, you're very welcome. You're absolutely in the right place. Now, joining me today is my sort of partner in crime, often co-host on webinars. It's our head of engagement, Kristi Foster. Hey, Kristi.
Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone who's joining. It's great to be here. We always have fun when Nick and I get to do one of these webinars or live events together, and as partners in crime.
It is good. We always enjoy these events, and we're really looking forward to this one. It's going to be a good one. We've had lots of interesting events, so it's really nice that you're kind of with us here this evening or this morning or whatever time it is for you. Now, today, over 1/3 of Conservation Careers members are career switchers. Okay, so they are professionals or graduates who are switching their careers or your careers into conservation from a different sector. It might be totally unrelated, or it might be off to one side. So if you've always had a passion for wildlife and you want to work in wildlife conservation, but you don't know where to start, well, today, you're in the right place, okay? Now, conservation is a really exciting sector, okay, to be working in. It presents lots of opportunities for switchers like yourselves. Good news, there's more jobs available than ever before, okay? And often NGOs, are seeking skilled people from outside the sector to jump in and to join and to help to have more impact and to grow the movement. We've spoken to lots of CEOs doing interviews and podcasts and things like that over the last 8-9 years now. And they often agree that we need help from outside the sector coming in, and they're really going to transform the movement and take it to where we want it to be. But the big question is, where do you start? Okay, if you're outside of conservation and you want to move it in, it's often bewildering, it's confusing, and that just presents barriers and stops you from making progress and knowing how to even kind of which direction to go in. Okay, what jobs might be right for you to do and what training might you need? These are the sorts of questions we get asked all the time. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can. Okay, over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to leave time for questions at the end. And we'll also be sharing lots of resources with you this evening as well during the session in the chat box. Okay, and we'll reference that as we do it, which will allow you to go deeper. Okay, so if you see the resource there, you like the sound of it, do click, but do then just save that and read it later. Okay, we don't want to be distracting you off into kind of resource fill. Just save the tabs, save them all for later. It's all there for you. Right, okay, so we're going to switch to slides. Okay, it's not going to be slide overload, but they are going to be useful for us this evening. And just as I do that, it'd be really nice if you could just jump into the chat, okay, and just say really briefly, hello and where are you? Okay, it'd be lovely to hear from you. We always like to know where our audience is. We've got a very international audience, and it's exciting to see where you're based. So I'm Nick. I'm near Cambridge in the UK. I'd love to hear, where are you guys this evening? Okay, and while we do that, I'll be. Oh, hello already, Connor in Tennessee. Thank you, Connor, and Petra in Belgium. Welcome. Right, I'm going to switch to slides, okay, as you guys let us know. And what we'll do, okay, I'll give you a bit of an outline, okay, as you're kind of saying hi on the chat box there. Thank you, everyone. So what we're going to cover today, you'll see here in front of you, we're going to cover 3 or 4 main things. We're going to cover, why conservation needs career switches. I think that's really important to understand that the movement's here for you, and we need you. We're going to talk through the top career switch questions that we get asked quite regularly at Conservation Careers, kind of cover them off. We're going to share more resources. You can go into more detail there as well. And we're going to start talking about, how you can switch your career into conservation as well. And then finally, we'll touch on, how you can get help. Okay, if you feel inspired and motivated, you want to go deeper, you want some support, we'll talk about how you can get that as well, whilst leaving hopefully lots of time for questions at the end as well that either are sparked through our discussions or you've brought with you and we've not answered them, yet. Sound good, Kristi?
Sounds perfect. Yeah, lots of stuff to cover as always, but exciting stuff. Yeah, and it looks like we've got a pretty diverse group of people joining us.
Yeah, I've got Key West, Newquay, sorry, in Wales. I love it. I go there on holidays. Yeah, Gainesville in Florida. We've got Weston. Hi, Weston. You're in CC Pro. Recognize you, Denver. And we've got Glenn in Kingston. Sorry, Tina in, oh gosh, how do you say that? Cucamonga? Sorry if I said that wrong. Very welcome. Jen in Inverness. Susan in Washington, lots over stateside. Welcome, everyone. Julie in Dubai as well. Maria in Germany, welcome, 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 everyone. Lots of you in there. Kristen, Susie, Joyce, everyone else. Good to see you all. Thank you for sharing. Good to have you. Really nice to know where you're all coming from as well. Let's get this thing going then. We've got lots to cover tonight. We're hopefully going to go at a nice pace, not too fast, not too slow, but I want to kind of make sure we kind of get through as much as we can for you guys. So we will keep it within the hour as well. So we are keeping half an eye on the clock for you guys. So first up, let's start with, who are career switchers? Okay, it's just so we're really clear on, who we're talking to and what we're talking about. So who or what are career switchers? Well, as you kind of already heard a little bit in my intro, then over 1/3 of Conservation Careers members and our audience are career switchers. Okay, so you're in kind of good company. You're not on your own. You're not even imposters. You're very welcome. You are professionals, you're graduates, you're looking to switch your careers from outside the conservation industry into the industry, or maybe even switching back from another profession in a kind of former career. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. The point being here is there is a place for almost anyone within conservation. Career switchers can be of any age. Okay, so we've worked with university students right through to people in their 70s. You can be from any career stage as well, from early career, entry level, graduate through to mid or even senior level positions. You can switch at any point in your career. You can be from any background as well. You could be doing sales and marketing or nursing or art or virology or a teacher or a lawyer or a nurse or whatever. Okay, you're very welcome. Okay, and finally, you can be from any country as well. Not everyone can or needs to move or relocate to switch. And more we're seeing, remote-based flexible working as well within the sector. I think what really kind of unites and brings everyone together across all these different ages, career stages, background, and countries are two things. The first thing is a passion for wildlife. That's the one thing I think all career switchers are sharing, those people who want to kind of work in wildlife conservation. And the second is often a real desire to find a deeper purpose and a meaning in your career, to have more impact, okay, and perhaps even to leave more of a legacy as well. So if that's you, and I hope it is, you're very welcome. We're here to kind of serve you this evening. Kristi, over to you.
All right. I was just, well, first, I think it's nice to see that there's no one profile of a career switcher,
Yeah.
It's really diverse. People from many different backgrounds and sectors, and I think that's fantastic. And I just saw in the chat there that there are a couple of people connecting because they're based in the same place, from the same place, which is kind of neat.
That's great.
So on top of that, diversity of career switchers, there's also different types of switches or different types of career switchers. And this might be a new concept to you, or maybe you recognize this. I'd be curious to know if you know which type of switcher you are, if you recognize yourself here, if you're making a career change. So we kind of defined 3 types. And the first is a single switch. So that's really where you're transferring existing skills that you have into the conservation sector. So for example, if you've got a background in fundraising, say for international development or the health sector or something else, and you want to use those fundraising skills in conservation to help, say, a conservation charity, that's what we call a single switch. A double switch is what happens if you change job type and sector. So for example, you want to switch from the health sector into conservation, and you also want to switch from being a fundraiser to being a project manager in conservation. So that's a double switch. And then switching back, I guess you could think of as like going back to something that you love. So maybe you trained originally in conservation or something related to the environment. You did some education, maybe even worked in the sector for a while. And then you pursued a different path. Maybe, an opportunity came up and you worked in a different sector, or you had a family, or you left your career for a bit. And now you're looking to come back and re-enter conservation. So that's switching back. And we're going to talk about that one a little bit later too, when we talk about employment gaps also. If you want to read a little bit more about the different types of career switchers, we've got a guide that describes them also if you're curious. And I think we'll pop those kind of resources. Yeah, Nick, thanks for that. We'll pop those in the chat. Perfect. All right. So we've got a diversity of career switchers who are super passionate and skilled. We've got different types of switches that it's possible to make. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem is that in some sectors, the path to get from imagining what your ideal career looks like to getting into that career, getting employed, is kind of like A to B. It's a series of fairly well-defined steps to get into that career. So you might think of, the healthcare sector, or being a physiotherapist, or being in engineering or law or architecture or a trade. There tend to be quite well-defined paths to employment. In the conservation sector, however, it often doesn't look like that. It's often much more of a maze. It's much more hectic. There aren't well-defined paths, and that tends to create a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of overwhelm. So some of you who are listening today or watching later might be feeling some of those things, or have felt some of those things about your career switch. So getting, I guess, a little bit more personal here. What are your biggest worries about switching careers into conservation? So feel free, if you'd like, to just type whatever word comes first to mind, or words, into the chat. But just thinking about that question, what are the biggest worries that come to mind when you think about making a switch into the conservation sector? There's a few that we tend to hear about quite often. So often we hear that people are worried about being underqualified, especially if they're competing with people who have, conservation or biology degrees. Yeah, exactly. Just what you guys are sharing in the chat, that I need a degree, for example, in marine biology. Great. Yeah, I can see there too, lower salary. Great. We're going to touch on that later. We're going to talk about pay. Yeah, finances. Being unsure about what kind of job opportunities there are. We're going to talk about that. Moving and leaving everything behind. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if that was moving as in physically moving, country or place, or just moving sector. Age, that's something we hear about quite often too. People wondering if they're too old to make a switch or to be taken seriously compared to other younger candidates. Wow, lots of stuff here. Experience in the sector, convincing that I've got the transferable skills and passion. Yeah, experience not relevant. We hear that a lot too, sort of worrying that as a career switcher, your skills won't be understood or valued or recognized by conservation employers because they're coming from a different sector. They're transferable skills, for sure. Finding local opportunities. Yep, not having to move, only in a certain region. Yep. Affording volunteer, low paid roles, getting more education. Nice. Okay. Bad at applications and resumes. That was very honest. Great. Thanks for sharing, everyone. So lots of concerns come up. And I think it's really quite interesting if you look at all those things you've just mentioned and that come to mind when you think about your own worries, and then kind of compare and contrast that with what conservation employers are thinking. Because, when you're switching, you often have a lot of sort of preconceptions and about potential barriers, and they might be quite different to what the employers are thinking. So employers tend to value experience over qualifications. So that, for example, they might value someone who's got real life experience in the workplace over someone who's just graduated. They tend to value skills that come from outside conservation. Like Nick said earlier, we hear from a lot of CEOs that they want skills from outside conservation. They tend to value diversity in many senses, so including different backgrounds and career paths, different ages, etc. And overall, just different perspectives, different ways of looking at problems and solving problems. So chances are you might be a lot more worried about things like, age or qualifications or employment gaps than the employers are. You might actually be worried about something that could be an asset to an employer. So something to bear in mind.
Really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really interested to see the themes coming out in the chat there too. Thanks everyone for sharing. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kristi. I guess when many of you think about switching careers and what your path might look like, you might be thinking it looks a bit something like this. Okay, really squiggly wiggly from where you are now to where you want to be. Okay. And Kristi mentioned a minute ago about, how many career paths, whether that's banking or law or, teaching or whatever, often has quite an A to B, well-defined, well-trodden pathway, but not in conservation, and it makes it really tricky for people like you to kind of navigate that path, and to know where to start. But it doesn't really need to be that way. We believe that careers within conservation can be much more like this, okay? And we're on a mission to make it that way. And the good news is that we have a step-by-step approach to switching careers into conservation, which can really help your career to be a bit more direct. Maybe not as laser focused as this arrow, but certainly much more direct, much more strategic, much more guided, much more directional. So let's start then by kind of talking through and answering some of the common questions we get from career switchers like you to kind of start to kind of put that puzzle together and to give you a little bit of that guidance that you're looking for. Well, you see here on screen, lovely lady, Patricia Zarita, who's the CEO of BirdLife International. She's my old boss from years gone by. And on, I think it was episode 1 actually of the podcast that we did, we talked to conservationists from around the globe about their careers. And one question I always ask is, what advice would you give others? What would you like to share to potential switchers? And she said, that I feel that the key skills that we need are completely outside the conservation community. They're in the private sector. I love the fact that I actually now have 3 top people in my team that come from private companies, and they have a completely different mentality on how to push us forward. And that very much links to what you said, Kristi, about different perspectives kind of coming in. And I think just on that point, I just want to kind of switch the slides off for a second. I've heard, loads of times from lots of different people that conservationists are looking for skills from outside the movement, okay? And as a switcher, you have a big advantage, okay, over graduates and early career job seekers that are currently, within the conservation market, if you like. And what's that one big advantage? It's your career to date, okay? Now, through your career, you'll have accumulated skills and knowledge and experiences, which, often can be transferred into conservation and are sought after by conservation employers. For example, I'm going to read through a top 10 list. Okay, so 10 transferable skills valued by conservation employers. And as I read through them quite quickly, okay, just ask yourself, if you have any experience of any of the following. Okay, so number 1, verbal communication. Can you express your ideas clearly and confidently in speech? Teamwork. Can you work confidently within a group? Commercial awareness, understanding the commercial realities affecting an organization, analyzing and investigating. Can you gather information systematically and establish facts and principles and solve problems? Can you work off your own initiative and have self-motivation? Okay, identifying opportunities and proactively putting forward ideas and solutions. Number 6, can you drive? Do you have determination to get things done, make things happen? Number 7, written communication. Okay, can you express yourself clearly in writing? Number 8, planning and organizing. Can you plan activities and carry them out effectively? Being able to manage projects effectively. Number 9, flexibility. Are you adaptable? Okay, can you change to situations and environments? And then finally, time management. Can you manage time effectively, prioritizing tasks and work to deadlines? Okay, I'm thinking many of you will probably be nodding along to quite a few of those top 10. Okay, they're very common transferable skills you'll pick up in many different sectors, many different roles. Okay, and the chances are your work and experience to date provides a lot of evidence to potential employers that you have what they're looking for. Okay, and it can really help you to switch careers into conservation. So what we're going to do, Kristi, could you just drop that ultimate guide in there if you've got that already? We have an ultimate guide. Thank you so much. It's an ultimate guide to the top skills, okay, conservationists are looking for. So you can do a little bit of a deeper dive if you want to read that in more detail. Now, in addition to these kind of softer transferable skills, often employers are looking for some specialist knowledge as well. And that relates dependent upon the specific role that you're targeting. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So for instance, if you want to work in, community countryside management, as a warden or a ranger, then you need to demonstrate, for instance, you have a knowledge of some specific things like, can you handle a chainsaw or a knapsack sprayer, or can you do a protected species survey, or whatever that might be. So really the important thing, okay, along with your transferable skills, is having a real clear understanding of the role you're targeting, okay? And that will provide the role that will provide, a really rewarding, challenging, and fulfilling career. And that's such a vital step because it allows you to understand what training or knowledge or gaps you might need to fill in order to make that switch happen, okay? So a really important principle there. Let me just switch back to slides then, if I can. There we go. And Kristi, do they need a master's degree?
Yes, thanks, Nick. We get asked this question a lot, on pretty much every live event we run, I think it's fair to say. And unfortunately, there's no yes or no answer. It really does depend. But it is very possible and fairly easy to find an answer to this. And that really starts with looking at the requirements for roles in conservation. Because if you have a clear target job in mind that you're going after, you'll be able to understand based on the requirements if you need a master's degree. Obviously, employers tell you what you need, what they're looking for in their job descriptions. So if you know what kind of job you're targeting, and you look at job descriptions for, say, entry-level roles or perhaps even mid-level roles, you can see what they're asking for in terms of education and skills and experiences. And interestingly, I was just mentioning to Nick that before this webinar, I was reading an article talking about how there's a bit of a shift post-COVID in more skills-based hiring versus education-based hiring, which is kind of neat to see. So employers are definitely, there's an increasing focus on skills. Mm-hmm. Having said that, obviously, there's a lot of well-educated people working in the conservation sector, and it has a lot of benefits. So we did a survey a few years back, and we asked people what their highest ranking qualification was. And 19% said they had a doctorate qualification, 42% had a postgraduate qualification, 34% had an undergraduate degree or qualification, and then 6% had school level education. So like just over 60% of conservation professionals have a master's degree or higher, roughly speaking. Obviously, getting a master's, it represents an investment, both in terms of time and money, but it can make you more employable. And I think it can also really build your knowledge of the industry as a whole. So there's lots of benefits that come with it. And Nick's just shared, thanks, a link to a whole guide we have written on this question of, do I need a master's degree? So if you're wrestling with this one, we encourage you to have a look at the guide, and you can dig into it in a bit more detail.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kristi. So switching back then to me, so what jobs are there for switchers like you? This is such a vital step. The previous two slides talked about that, whether you need a master's degree or not, and it really depends upon having that focus, that clarity of the job type. Now, the industry is much bigger, and it's likely to be much bigger than perhaps you imagine when seeking to switch careers into conservation. It's a professional industry nowadays, and increasingly professionalizing, I would say, offering a dizzying array of conservation job types to switchers like yourself. Now, on conservation careers to date, we've listed over 45,000 conservation jobs with the biggest conservation job board, shameless plug. And we've covered over 25,000 different job titles. And that's a bit of an estimate. It's probably far higher than that, to be honest. So what we've done is we've really tried to, and we've really worked hard to try and simplify things, to clarify things, to make your career options as clear as possible. So let me talk you through how these things look. Okay, so how do we break down 25,000 or more different job titles into something really meaningful that provides you more direction? Well, I think when you think about jobs, there's two things that we pull together, okay, for clarity. The first thing I want you to think about is the theme of work, okay? And this is often like the issue that you're seeking to tackle. And it's often associated with like specific knowledge, and particularly often something quite close to your heart, okay? So when you think about a job, just think about the sort of thing you really care about. What do you want to focus on? What piques your attention? What campaigns or appeals or charities do you support even? What do you read about in your spare time? This can give you a bit of an indication as to where your passion lies, okay, within conservation or outside. So you'll see some themes here in front of you: animal welfare, climate change, community conservation. Marine conservation is a big one, as is restoration and rewilding, if I can get my words out, okay? Sustainability, and so forth. This isn't an exhaustive list. This list will go on forever, and you might have very specific passions that you care about that you'd really like to tackle in your career. For me, my passion started out as barn owls. So for me, my theme and passion would be barn owls, or at least bird conservation would be really close to my heart. And for you, it might be different. Feel free to share in the chat if you want to share what your theme or what you really care about, the thing you'd like to tackle. We have a private community. I remember recently someone saying they're really passionate about amphibians, and that is absolutely cool. If they're not working on that, they're not interested, okay? And everyone's different, okay? So what's your theme? That's the first part of a job, okay? The second part, and we hear all the time, I want to be a marine conservationist. Well, that's a theme, okay? So that's a topic, an area you want to kind of make a difference within. The next question comes, okay, so how do you want to help marine conservation? How do you want to help barn owls or amphibians or whatever it might be, or big cats? Thank you, Kristen. Well, in that case, the next bit is what's the function? Okay, the second part of the job. How do you want to help? Okay, and we've broken down the jobs within that we've seen going through the job board, those 25,000 different job titles, into 10. Okay, really kind of core functions. Okay, and this covers 95% of all the jobs we see at the kind of high level. Okay, so, and they're often associated with specific skill sets or training. Okay, so you can see them on the screen here. I'll rattle through them quite quickly. So animal carer, because that might be zookeeping or vets or veterinary nurse or something like that, or an animal shelter perhaps. Communicator, really key job, really transferable skills. Think David Attenborough, but think, managing social media and everything in between. Ecologists, okay, particularly consultant ecologists going out in the field doing protected species surveys, advising clients and developers on what they can and can do within environmental law. Economists, really important nowadays, putting the numbers to conservation and providing the kind of business case for saving the environment, if you like. Educators, okay, educating children's schools groups, but also adult groups and more, really important. Fundraising, it doesn't function without money, okay, and fundraising is a real core skill set, a really important skill set for all conservationists. Land managers, so we're talking about countryside rangers, wardens, people who like to get their hands dirty and get out into the countryside, okay, and really kind of like move some earth, if you like. Organizational managers, okay, and that could be everything from the CEO down to people in the admin department and the finance teams, supporting charities, supporting the movement. Final three, policy advocate, okay, so advocating for environmental law changes, okay, and seeking to enforce that. Project managers, okay, very transferable, okay, so managing projects, which is really how conservation happens, discrete projects, packages of work, okay, delivered against a time and a deadline and a target, okay, and often funded by external donors, really trying to make the difference that way. Core skill set. And finally, scientist or researcher, okay, so really answering the key questions to tackle biodiversity loss, okay. Thank you for sharing. I can see in there, Marianne, ocean conservation, brilliant. Marig, sorry, fisheries, river restoration, so you like wet things, okay. Invasive species control, I'm interested in that too. So Dipta, marine conservation, brilliant. Thank you for sharing. So as you started to do, and so Dipta, you've done there yourself, okay, really how we see jobs nowadays at conservation careers, and this is sort of thinking that's evolved quite recently that has really clarified things for us, is a job is a theme versus a function, okay. So on screen you'll see here, the example would be a marine scientist, okay. That might be your sweet spot, your niche, okay. And you might have a few different niches, okay, but that's a kind of good example of how this sort of thing fits together. So understand the causes and the issues you want to tackle. I think that comes quite naturally, and we can ask some questions to elucidate that, and then understand the functions you want to do. And that comes from what you're good at, what you love doing, what you've done to date, what you want to bring with you in your career, okay, and understanding, well, do you want to switch just across, okay, do that single switch, or do you want to do a double switch, and where does that pathway look for you personally, okay. Whew, okay.
Lots of information, hey?
Yeah, and we're bang on time. I looked at the time, we're doing very well.
Nice. Yeah, there was a question in there about, what if you're interested in multiple themes? And that's great, because a lot of the job functions that Nick's described, might span more than one theme. You might work in communications as a communicator, in marine and restoration and rewilding and ecotourism and a million other things. So that's very possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just picking up on that too, I see, Anthony, you've put stats and data analysis, like within some of these functions, are sub niches, and you're picking one out there for science and research, analysis and data and stats. You could also put GIS and mapping and that sort of stuff. So it kind of breaks down, but broadly that sits within kind of science and research. So you can get really discrete and niche down, but these are the kind of big lumpy themes. Sorry, Kristi.
No, that's okay. I always wish we had more time, because there's so much to discuss in all of this. But so I guess the key question now is, having looked at those job functions and job themes, the question is, which one is right for you? Which one is right for you? So if you're switching into conservation, or you're thinking about switching into conservation, likely you're looking to follow your passion, have an impact in conservation in the sector, and ultimately just feel motivated and happy in your career. So how do you start to find that? We thought this was kind of a neat quote from the Director General of WWF International, Dr. Marco Lambertini, who said, "My advice would be to think about, if you want to work within the environmental sphere, choose a stream of work and a discipline that could contribute to it, but that also reflects your passion. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a technical biological science," which I think is really, kind of encapsulates some of what we said already. So here at Conservation Careers, when we work with people to help them find their niche in conservation, we encourage them really to start with themselves. So we kind of work through the process of self-reflection to help identify, what makes you happy? What are you great at doing? What are your day-to-day needs? What kind of environment do you need to work in? And ultimately, how do you thrive? And all of that comes together to form what we call a career compass, which is something that guides you. So it provides direction and clarity in your career and when making decisions about your career. So that's kind of like phase one, is that self-reflection. Phase two that works alongside it is really understanding what the employment options are in the sector. So what kind of conservation jobs, like Nick's just described in detail, the different functions and themes, would be a fit for you. And ultimately trying to find that job that, the world needs, it's important, is something you're good at, it's something you love doing, and it's, of course, something you can be paid to do. That's important too. So the conservation sectors, it's big sector, it's fast, it's dynamic, it's changing and growing all the time. And it's obviously really easy to become a bit bewildered and confused and lost in that process. And we're trying to help clarify and simplify that as much as we can. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but we run a program called the Conservation Careers Bootcamp, which we launched at the beginning of this year, where we break down the sector into different conservation employer types and different job themes and job functions, job types. And we look at, the different, what are the pros and cons of each one? For example, pay, flexibility, training, etc. And we look at, what are the entry level requirements for different job types and much, much more. And so we go through a series of tasks of self-reflection, understanding the sector to help you arrive at that answer of what's your target conservation job. So Nick will come back and I think talk a little bit more about that at the end, right, Nick?
Yep.
But just to give you a quick overview. And then I think we can go probably to the next slide. Perfect, thanks. Okay, so an important question, how much can I earn? I think it's fair to say that, most of us don't choose to work in conservation with the primary purpose of getting rich. And if you are looking at making a switch from the private sector into conservation, it's totally possible that you'll take a pay cut in order to do that. However, That doesn't mean that you need to be on the breadline, and it doesn't mean that you can't support yourself and make a good living in conservation. And on top of that, you're doing something that is important and fulfilling for you, important for the planet, and something you care about. So there's a lot of benefits there too. But money is a constraint for all of us in one way or another. So it's useful just to bear in mind that there's some job functions in the sector that tend to attract a higher wage. So for example, often these are ecologists, so ecological consultancy, an economist, so environmental economics, and fundraisers tend to be at the higher end of the spectrum. In kind of the middle bracket might be roles like communicator, policy advocate, project manager, program manager, and scientist, many different, sub functions within each of those. And then at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of salary might be educator, so environmental education, and land manager, such as a warden or a ranger, countryside manager. And then the other piece to that, I guess, is that, the charity sector, charities tend to pay a little less than the private employers in conservation. So the type of employer can influence pay also. If you want to delve into that in more detail, we do put out a series of ultimate guides for different types of jobs that we've been developing. And in a number of those, there's a section on pay, on salary, so you can kind of get an idea. It'll give you an idea range. And obviously, if you want to know more, you have to sort of dig in and look at your particular job type in your region and your employer type and all that kind of stuff. All right. So this is kind of a fun slide. Thanks, Nick. This is one of my favorite quotes, actually, I think, since I joined Conservation Careers. So this fellow, Dominic Jeremy, who became the Director General of the Zoological Society of London, ZSL, really well-known organization, has this lovely quote about how he made his career change. So he says, first of all, don't be shy. And he worked as a senior British diplomat for over 20 years in countries like East Timor, United Arab Emirates, and then ultimately he served as British ambassador to Afghanistan. And he switched careers into wildlife conservation as the Director General of ZSL. So I'm just going to read out what he says about that career switch, because I think it's quite powerful. So he said, as I looked at ZSL from afar and thought, gosh, that Director General job looks really interesting and that would really speak to my values and perhaps I could bring something to it. I was a little held back a bit by thinking, but they wouldn't really want anybody who didn't have a professional conservation background for that. And then actually I looked at what was relevant, what the organization was looking to do, had some conversations with the people involved and decided, you know what, I could really add value here. And I think for anybody who has an interest in conservation and knows they have particular skills that they can offer, it is always worth having that conversation. Don't hold back, don't self-censor would be my advice, and I'm really glad I didn't. So that's his quote. I just think it's such a neat quote and such a neat story. And we do have a podcast episode if you want to listen to the rest of his story and what he has to say and his advice too. Really powerful stuff. Okay, so
you still rolling, Kristi?
Yeah, it's because I'm on my laptop, so I'm always juggling two sides, and I can't tell if you switched slides yet. So this is coming back to what we touched on earlier about the different types of career switchers and that idea of a switch back. And the question here is, can I switch after an employment gap? And in short, the answer is yes. So you need a few things in order to be able to do that, though. Obviously, if you know your target role, you need to have the skills and the experience for that target role, what the employer is asking for. And then the other important part is being able to demonstrate your passion for conservation. So, if you've been out of the sector for a number of years, how can you demonstrate that you're passionate about, engaged in, and committed to conservation, really? So when you're applying for jobs after an employment gap, really you want to position that gap in a positive light and show the employer, what did you do during that time that might be relevant to them or of interest to them, and use your transferable skills as much as possible. So you might have to be a little bit more creative in order to identify them, but we've got a guide that sort of walks you through step by step how to identify your transferable skills, how to use them and present them in an application to give yourself the best chance possible. So we've shared that too. Worth having a look at.
Yeah, thank you, Kristi. Yeah, it's a really valuable guide. Definitely download it, definitely use it. It's real step-by-step how to apply. And it really works because a lot of people are not very good at applying actually, but if you follow the guide, it can get you into that sort of top 10, 20% of the ones that get interviews. So do use it. Right. Really starting to wrap up then as we kind of go towards questions. If you've got questions, start thinking about what they might be, because we'll be asking you in a few minutes' time. Do I need to volunteer or intern? Okay, so volunteering and interning is a great way to get hands-on experience of your target job. Okay, it also provides real evidence. We talked about this keyword before, evidence, but provides evidence to employers that you can do the specific job in question, and it can help to build your network within the industry as well. It also clearly displays your commitment to the cause. I think particularly for switchers, the question is, why are you switching into conservation? And it's a way of sort of demonstrating your passion and commitment to that you've done some volunteering, and it clearly connects to an interest and something that you'd like to bring with you in your career. However, obviously, volunteering and internship sometimes comes at a cost, certainly in terms of time, okay, an investment of your time, and sometimes money. Now, you don't have to pay for volunteering. You can create your own volunteer or internships. We've got webinars on that too. You can go back and watch it and listen again, and we teach you how to do that for free. Okay, you can also connect with free opportunities or even paid opportunities out there too, but there's always a cost that comes with that. So in time, and if you choose to pay, then in terms of money. What we recommend is that you use volunteering and internships as a great way to kind of test drive different roles in order to identify that niche that suits you best, the right role for you as part of your career exploration. And once you have that target job clearly identified, it can really help you then to more easily identify any employability gaps, okay, which you might have in terms of any skills or experiences or knowledge that the employers are looking for that you don't have. At that point, you could ask the question, actually, does a volunteer or an internship allow me to fill and bridge that gap to get some experience of this thing that employers are looking for that I don't currently have? It can be a great way of just really strategically, okay, getting the specific skill or knowledge that you need through that sort of experience, that sort of route. Now, again, we can talk you through this as part of our bootcamp process as well. We can go much deeper into that. We also have a guide, which I think Kristi is going to kindly, if you haven't already, shared in the chat. Thank you very much. Okay, and it can kind of walk you into more details about how to choose the right volunteer or internship, okay, how to create one yourself, and also the list of top free and paid internships we've got out there as well. So have a look at that guide if that's of interest to you as well. Oh, we've covered a lot. Hopefully not too much. Hopefully we've got a good pace. I feel we've got just a nice pace. We've given you guys a lot of guidance and value, and all those resources are there for you to use, okay, to go off and use at a later date. So do save them, okay, and do read them. Summary then, what do we cover very briefly before we kind of switch over to you guys and do some questions? And thank you. I can see some questions dropping in there already. First up, conservation needs career switchers. It needs you. It needs your skills. Most career switchers don't really know how to make that switch and don't have the strategy in place to make it as direct and as effortless and painless as possible. Okay, the right approach to switching, understanding yourself, finding the right niche for you, is much quicker and much easier. Okay, much more strategic, and we can help. We can really help to make that career switch happen as well. All the free guides, it's all there to use, make the most of those resources. If you want to go the next step, okay, if you want our help and our support, and you want our training and guidance as well, we're also here for you. I just want to highlight that we do have open right now, actually, it's our Conservation Careers Bootcamp, okay, which is a comprehensive program of training. We have a support community as well, and you gain full access to our job and experiences board, which is all designed to make the switch quicker for you to becoming a professional wildlife conservationist. So within the program, there are 3 career boosting things. You can see them on screen there. It's the Conservation Career Kickstarter, which is our self-guided career planning program, which I'll show you in a second. We also have our support community, CC Pro, and our jobs board. So the easiest way to me just to quickly show you through this. Okay, so just do some screen sharing.
While you're doing that, Nick, I just wanted to mention, if you guys have questions, please could you pop them in the Q&A rather than the chat? There's a chance we'll lose them in the chat, but if you put them in the Q&A, we'll find them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you could just copy them across if you've already got them in. And if you then go to Q&A, you can also upvote questions you like the look of, because what we'll do is work from the top down. Thank you for the reminder, Kristi. Yeah. Can you still see the screen okay, Kristi?
Yep.
Cool. Okay.
I can see two of you.
Oh gosh, sorry about that. I'll scroll straight down. So the Kickstarter, it's our online self-paced program. You get a full access for 1 year. It leads you through units of self-reflection, understanding who you are. It leads you then through a process of understanding the different employer types, job types, finding that target job, and understanding stepping stones and how you might switch careers as well. Okay, and then finally, it's about rubber hits the road. How do you then get hired? How do you put in a great application? How do you prepare for deliver great interviews as well? Okay, so it's just a case of once you signed up, you gain access to each module, each video, and all the tasks that associate with that. You can do that entirely at your own pace. It's about 15 hours in total. You have a full year to do that, and you get support from us to do that as well. I'm going really quick, so I want to get to questions. Secondly, you get access to our support community. Okay, so we have a private support community called CC Pro. It's an amazing place. It's full of amazing people, okay, who are all in there in the job hunt together. I know a few people on the call here today are in CC Pro. If you like it, let us know. We think it's a great place. In here, we run regular events. We do Q&As with our audience. Ask us anything. You can see with Kristi and me coming up quite soon. We also list our webinars. You can watch everything again here in here as well. Get the resources. You can see our application showcase, which is just brilliant. This does is it shows you examples of successful applications for different jobs. Okay, and you can go in there and actually look at, okay, what does a successful job look like for IUCM? Okay, you can read the cover letter, the CV, the resume, the application form, and learn from that. Okay, and you can just share, communicate, chat with each other, okay, and connect. It's a great, supportive, really warm, really exciting environment. You're not alone in the job hunt. And then finally, you gain access to our job board where we list 15,000 jobs, volunteer internships, and courses every year. You get full access to that. So you can set up job alerts. You can you won't miss any jobs that come through and apply for them. Okay, I'll stop there. End of hard sell. The course is, the boot camp is currently open. Okay, it's open until, you can see here on the bottom of the screen, for 10 more days. Okay, until Friday, the 8th of July. After that date, we're going to close access to the bootcamp and then support the cohort through it. You would be our second cohort ever. The first cohort was back in January. Okay, and we have a special offer right now that closes again on Friday the 8th, so next Friday, which is 50% off the regular price, and you can enroll for just $9.99. That's $9.99, pounds or euros, okay, whichever the currency is that you'd like to choose. Okay, we've never done that before. Don't know if we'll do it again, but it's our kind of low cost, just sign up really and get going straight away. Okay, that's the end of that. Let's switch to questions. I've stopped showing my screen, haven't I? Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we've got 10 minutes for questions, which is absolutely perfect. So I can see some questions dropped in the Q&A already. Thank you very much. What I'll do is I'll go for the ones that have the most votes on them. So if you like the look of them, please give it the thumbs up. Okay. And then we'll work our way down from there. So Julie Dickin is asking, is the bootcamp course the same as the Kickstarter course? In essence, they're very similar. So the Kickstarter is part of the bootcamp. Okay, and what's slightly different is that we treat you more of a cohort. So you're going through the course together. Okay, so we have a live welcome session at the very beginning, just a week after enrollment closes. We bring people together, we welcome you into the CC Pro community, and then you're then with us then for the next 12 months. Okay, we'll support you through that. Also, we have quite a different pricing structure you'll notice on the bootcamp as well. So Kickstarter, you can just sign up, and we're talking pounds now, it's £295. Okay, the bootcamp, okay, you can access that for £250 right now. But again, you can sign up for just $9.99, and there's some monthly installments like a payment plan. We don't have that for the Kickstarter yet. So they're very similar, but there's also some differences around how we bring you in and how you can actually sign up and gain access to that. Thanks for your question.
Also, there's quite a comprehensive portion of training around applications in particular too, that we've kind of expanded on for the bootcamp. So you get that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a whole course about applications, which we've developed out since, I say we, Kristi has. Yeah, which is all included. It's as much value as we can possibly offer you to get you switched across. Maria, are there any job boards to scroll through to get an overview of what's available out there? I'd like to work in marine conservation as a dive instructor. I've done dive-related projects before. It seems, though, that it is often required to have a marine biology degree next to it. So the question is, are there any job boards? I can think of one. We are the biggest conservation job board. So we list, 15,000 jobs. I've mentioned that already. So we're a good starting point. We're not the only job board. So I definitely encourage you to get out there and look for others. Marine specific job boards, there are some. Kristi, have you got any in the tip of your tongue?
What's the one in the US? I've just lost the name. It'll come to me in a second. So I'll put it in the chat when I remember.
Yeah.
It's a couple that are marine specific. 7 Seas.
Seven Seas Media. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there are others. I'm failing to remember them right now, but a quick Google around will get them. If anyone does know, please drop into the chat as well. But I'd say we list as many as possible. And marine is probably our most popular theme as well. So yeah, we do as much as we can. We also share a lot of interviews with marine conservationists. We've done podcasts. If you want to know what it's like to do those jobs, they're all freely available on the website. Just go to advice, type marine in, and away you go. You'll find them. Thank you very much for your question. Natasha, next one down. You've got a PhD in neuroscience, but on applying for conservation jobs, I've been unsuccessful and had feedback that you are overqualified and in the wrong field. I've done 3 months of part-time work in conservation, but you're struggling to be accepted for a full-time job. Any advice on how I can make myself look better to conservation employers? Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, you remind me of someone else actually we've worked with and helped, a lady called Magda, Magda, who's been working in pharmaceuticals, and she's sort of making the switch at the moment and has a very sort of science background too. I guess one question back to you, I can't see in here as to whether you've had any interviews yet as well, because there's many reasons as to why people aren't successful in the job hunt. One is perhaps your applications aren't as well tailored to the job as they could be, and that's a blocker for you to get into interviews. Okay, so if that's the case, if you feel you've put in lots of applications and you think you're doing a good job on them, but you're not getting through to interview, just have a real good honest look at that, and when we can look at it from our side too, if you want one-to-one support in terms of looking to see whether it's well suited and whether it's good enough to be getting through. If you are getting through to interview, but again, employers are giving you that feedback, then it might be about how you prepare for and how you deliver interviews as well. So again, lots of guidance on our site. So it might be just kind of part of that. The other aspect to job hunting, and Kristi, you might have kind of more thoughts to share on this too, is about your sort of strategy and whether you've figured out that niche or not. And we talked about this quite a lot already, so I won't kind of over-egg the point, but what a mistake we do see people make is they're going for too many different job types and they're not focused enough, and therefore you're not really collecting all the right sort of skills and knowledges to go for your specific target job. Now, you don't need everything employers are looking for. That's important. If you think you've got most of what they're looking for, put in a really good application, really work on it. Okay, better put in few good applications than lots of crummy ones. Okay, that gives you a really good chance. So it might be something about how ready are you for the job, and do you have that target narrowed down, or it might be about the quality of applications or your interview preparation. Yeah. Anything else to add on that, Kristi?
I think you covered it. I was just going to say that I think there's a tendency to go for the sort of entry level, more general conservation jobs, seeing that as a foot in the door. But if you're doing that, it might mean that what Nick's just said is true, that you're not actually focusing in on sort of a niche in conservation. So even if you've got all the skills and qualifications, if it's not really clear what you're targeting, you might not look competitive when you're applying. So yeah, oops, just turn my light off. Knowing what job you're targeting and making sure you're putting in applications that are really strong for that is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your question, Tina, and also thank you, Maria. No, Shantala, for saying Wise Oceans jobs. That was on the tip of my tongue too.
Thank you.
Marine conservation jobs. We also talked to them on the podcast too, so they're kind of friends of ours. Thank you. Tina Altis, is it possible to do an internship while working in a full-time job? Okay.
I've done it. I would, to be fair, that was doing my master's, but that was more than a full-time job. So yes, yeah, it's very possible. And we actually have a whole webinar on that about setting up your own internship. So if if you're struggling to see one that's kind of already out there and structured in the way you need, you can go and set up your own internship, go and approach an organization and propose something to them or see what they're open to and create your own. So yeah, it's very possible to do an internship part-time while working.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just dropped a link to our webinar. So you go there and see all the old webinars and probably dig that out and watch it again. Thanks for your question, Tina. Kristen, is it better to get a master's in a more specialized program or a more broad subject? For example, I'm looking to wildlife conservation programs, but would it be better to do ecology or biology? Ooh, big question, really. I think reflecting on that, I think the key really comes to, I guess, why are you doing the master's program? Is it because you have an idea in mind, a direction, a path? Are you working towards something quite clearly? In which case, maybe specializing in that direction. So using marine as the example, then maybe, specializing in a marine conservation master's or something within that subject that you have some clarity around would be better, probably. But if you're using it to kind of broaden your skills and also to use it as like an exploration tool, okay, so you're going to have 12 months of studying something, you're going to cover lots of different subjects, it's quite a broad topic, and you're still trying to find your pathway, then actually it's probably quite good to kind of stay broad and use it as your career exploration. So I wouldn't say one or the other. I think it depends upon, whether you have that kind of pathway defined and you're ready to, invest that time and money, which we talked about. It can certainly help. And if it's something you really want to do, then it can certainly help your career. Anything else on that, Kristi?
I would have said the same thing. Yeah, it depends what you want the master's for, because it can either help sort of define your career path a bit more, in which case doing something more general can be great. But if you've already sort of narrowed down your target job, then you might want to do something more specialized. So yeah, it comes back to the why.
It does, yeah. And we are up on time. But I did see, I'll just quickly scroll down for very short questions we can answer super quickly. And Murig, apologies if I got your name wrong, is LinkedIn useful for conservationists? See the link I've just dropped in. So we did a webinar about that last month. Okay, LinkedIn for conservationists, it's super useful. It's such a useful tool, such a valuable tool. So yes, absolutely, you can go and watch that back again. We teach you about how to set up your profile, how to use it for networking, and we talked about it in other webinars too, but that one's specific to that. So yes, that's great. Okay, if you want to know any more about the bootcamp, I saw a question there too. Again, if you just go to our website, you'll see on the bottom, actually at the moment, it's telling you the Conservation Career Bootcamp is open. You can click enroll. There's a full page there listing all the details about the course, okay? And so you have 10 days, okay? So it's open until the 8th of July. We'll probably be sending you emails about that too, because you registered for our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I've really enjoyed this. I always enjoy these sessions. Kristi, you've done a great job co-hosting and also helping to pull these slides together. It's been brilliant. Yeah, it's been really fun. The more we do this, the more we enjoy it too. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you all stay safe, stay well, wherever you might be, and we'll see you again in the next webinar, which will be next month. These are monthly. So yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words. I can see all that as well. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Petra, Maria, Chloe, Shantala. It's lovely to see you, and thanks for staying with us today. All the best. See you soon.